Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We're about to look at a genuinely startling framework from our source material that completely flips the script on vampirism. We are moving entirely away from the realm of supernatural horror and gothic fiction, and instead, we're looking at texts that describe this as a complex, highly clinical, biological system.
It's a pretty mind-bending premise. Think about it. What if vampires aren't the monsters of horror movies, but represent a literal biological necessity for an ancient bloodline? According to these esoteric texts, those fanged, cape-wearing creatures we see in modern fiction, yeah, they completely miss the mark. The sources argue that ritual vampirism is actually a highly documented, historical practice confined to very specific elite bloodlines, specifically those claiming what the texts call dragon or fairy heritage.
To make sense of all these claims, we're going to break down this strange taxonomy step by step. We'll start with moving beyond the Gothic myth. Then, look at royal vampirism and Starfire, martial blood and battle rushes, maintaining the hybrid form, and finally, fallen angels and cosmic origins.
Part 1. Beyond the Gothic myth.
The source material doesn't mince words here. It completely distances itself from Hollywood. They bluntly argue that modern Gothic tales and even so-called satanic blood rituals are just fraudulent play acting. They claim these are being performed by people who literally lack the specific genetic wiring, what the text specifically calls dragon synapses, required to actually process the biological essences involved in the real deal.
So, rather than supernatural magic or occult mumbo-jumbo, the texts present ritual vampirism as a deeply clinical practice. We're talking about a sophisticated system of psychobio-biology and endocrinology. It's not about being evil. According to this framework, it's strictly about chemistry, genetics, and harvesting hormones.
Which brings us to Section 2, Royal Vampirism and Starfire.
This is where we get into the most potent form of the practice, supposedly utilized by Scythian-Celtic High Dragon Kings. The absolute core of this royal practice is something called Starfire. The texts define this as the ingestion of female endocrine secretions, specifically menstrual blood and vaginal fluids. Why? Well, biologically speaking, these are incredibly rich in melatonin and serotonin. The whole intent of this royal vampirism was to harvest these high concentrations of hormones to stimulate the recipient's pineal gland. They believed this would radically enhance sensory perception, boost intelligence, and act as a sort of cure-all to promote extreme longevity. The texts actually detail the exact protocols for how this was done. The Rite of the Vampire involved these complex tantric, hermetic unions using specific breathing exercises and visualizations to really fire up the endocrine system. And notice the strict clinical requirement for absolute darkness here. That's because daylight literally prevents the human body from manufacturing melatonin.
This leads to a massive reinterpretation of a very famous myth. Within this specific biological framework, the Holy Grail isn't a physical cup at all. The Grail is interpreted as the virgin womb. This womb provides what they call the red gold, the blood, or the white gold, the secretions, directly to the Dragon Kings. The entire endocrine system was supposedly fired up during these rituals using specific harmonic chants, like the phrase Tir Ar Mat, basically turning the human body into a literal fountain of youth for these elites.
All right, Section 3, Martial Blood and Battle Rushes.
So, while the royals were after longevity and transcendent intelligence through pineal stimulation, Scythian warriors practiced something they called martial vampirism, which meant drinking the blood of fallen foes or friends. They weren't looking for longevity. They were hunting for a rush of adrenaline and thyroxine to absorb the valor and spirit of the dying warrior.
The texts draw a really clear contrast between these two practices, and it actually leads to a surprisingly mundane medical warning. While the adrenaline from martial vampirism provided an intense battlefield high, the texts point out it was physically unhealthy in the long run. Like, they literally say it could clog your arteries. It is such a remarkably clinical diagnosis applied to these ancient, violent blood rites.
Moving on to Section 4, Maintaining the Hybrid Form. Now, the sources introduce another really startling category. According to the texts, there are entities on Earth that possess a 50-50 genetic split between reptilian and mammalian DNA. And crucially, the reptilian genetics are foundational, while the mammalian sequences are secondary. Because of this, their physical bodies require the ingestion of human hormones, organs, and blood to literally feed their mammalian genetics. Without ingesting human DNA, the claim is that they simply cannot suppress their foundational reptilian form to maintain a human appearance. The authors propose that this desperate biological need for genetic maintenance is actually the true hidden origin behind ancient blood sacrificial rituals. They point to practices like those of the Aztecs, arguing that these weren't just religious offerings to the gods, but a literal harvesting system designed to maintain human form through mammalian energy harmonics.
So looking at a complete taxonomy of these entities, we can see exactly how the texts assign specific clinical motivations to each one. Dragon Kings seek melatonin for longevity, Scythian warriors seek adrenaline for a battle rush, and reptilian hybrids seek human DNA simply to hold their physical form. It completely strips away the supernatural to reveal this cold, calculated biological machinery.
Finally, Section 5, Fallen Angels and Cosmic Origins. The timeline presented in the text traces this all the way back, suggesting that fallen angels, who were supposedly the original architects of this bloodline, actually needed blood to reproduce. This establishes a corrupted, hybrid lineage that spans from the very dawn of humanity, straight through biblical events, all the way to a prophesied future. Take the story of Genesis, for example. The sources claim that the true crime of Cain wasn't just murder. They state he also ate the flesh and drank the blood of his brother Abel. The texts describe this specific behavior as more reptilian than human, essentially marking Cain as the very first hybrid vampire of this ancient lineage, inheriting his traits from a dark angelic origin. Furthermore, prophetic sections of the texts look ahead to the future. They suggest that ancient entities, often associated with names like Lilith, Semiramis, or the Queen of Babylon, will return during a period known as the Tribulation. And how exactly will they manifest? By once again consuming human blood to materialize and take a mortal, earthbound form. The authors even go so far as to reframe everyday modern practices. They claim that the Christian rite of communion, where participants are literally told, "This is my body and this is my blood," is actually a symbolic, or perhaps even literal echo of these ancient reptilian ceremonies of hormone ingestion, just hiding right in plain sight. Which leaves us with a truly profound thing to ponder. Whether you view these sources as a fascinating piece of hidden history or just an incredibly elaborate work of esoteric fiction, one has to wonder, how much of our modern world, our myths, and our institutions are still subconsciously shaped by this ancient biological pursuit of the blood? Think about that for a bit. Hopefully this explainer gave you a totally new lens to view these ancient tales.